She trusted him, but he not only betrayed her with another woman, he sold her secrets to the enemy. Emma discovered that her husband Jason wasn't just cheating. He was building a web of manipulation and betrayal, involving even her closest friend, Alec. Her investigation uncovers a dark past, threats, conspiracies, and a shocking truth that comes at the cost of lives. Can Emma stop Jason when every move she makes is being watched? What if those closest to her betray her again? This is a story where trust shatters, and the game ends in blood. Betray me and I'll betray you. How I made her just as ruthless as she was to me. Emma Stewart sat on the edge of the bed, hugging her knees, listening to the sound of the shower water fading into the semi-darkness. Her husband, Jason, had just returned from a business meeting. His cologne smelled different than usual. No, this was a new scent, foreign, sweet, and reeking of betrayal. She leaned forward, pulling his jacket from a pile of clothes on the chair. Her fingers brushed against the pocket, and she found a small piece of paper. Room 214, 9:30 p.m. Her heart clenched, but her eyes didn't fill with tears. She didn't cry anymore. After his shower, Jason came out looking just as he always did. Confident, attractive, slightly tired. He gave her a casual smile, but he didn't notice the note clenched in her hand. "How was your day, love?" he asked, drying his hair with a towel. "Ordinary," she replied quietly, looking straight at him. "And yours?" He held her gaze, then looked away, putting on his shirt. "Busy. The meeting ran late." Emma nodded, her smile nearly unchanging. She knew something had shifted. She could no longer trust him, but it wasn't yet time to rip the mask off his face. Saying nothing, she left the room, leaving him alone. The next day, she visited her old college friend, Alec. Their bond had always been strong, but now there was something new in her gaze, determination. Alec noticed it immediately. "Something happened?" he asked, handing her a cup of coffee. "I want you to help me." Her voice was cold, detached. "With what?" He leaned in closer. Emma looked him straight in the eye. "I want to prove he's cheating." Alec looked puzzled at first, but then he nodded. His face turned serious. Together, they devised a plan involving surveillance, checking messages, and secret meetings. But at the same time, a crack appeared in their relationship. Alec began to feel something for Emma that he had been hiding for years. When she left, Alec stared after her for a long time, sensing that something between them was changing. Meanwhile, Emma returned home to find Jason in his office. His phone was on the table, and when he stepped away to get coffee, she picked it up. In the messages, she found everything she needed to know. The screen displayed a photo, Jason with a blonde woman at a restaurant. Her fingers gripped the phone so tightly she nearly dropped it. But she put everything back in place, smiling coolly when Jason returned. "Something wrong?" he asked. "No, darling. Just checking the time." This time, she wasn't going to stay silent. But the question was, how exactly should she act? Emma sat in a cozy cafe that smelled of fresh croissants and bitter coffee. Her eyes scanned the laptop screen, where photos Alec had given her the night before were displayed. Each one was proof that Jason had been lying. In one photo, Jason and the same blonde woman from the phone picture were holding hands, looking like a couple in love enjoying a candlelit dinner. In another, they stood in a parking lot, her fingers gently brushing his cheek. Emma's heart ached, but her face remained unreadable. Across the table, Alec sat watching her closely. His hand was half raised, as if he wanted to touch her but didn't dare. "And now," he finally broke the silence. Emma looked up at him, her gaze blazing. "Now, I'll destroy him," she said quietly but firmly. "He thought I'd stay silent. Thought I'd just accept it." Alec sighed. "Are you sure this is the right path? Maybe it's better to just leave him?" Emma raised a skeptical eyebrow. "And let him live his life peacefully with her?" "No, Alec. He needs to understand that you can't play with someone's feelings without consequences." Alec tried to say something, but stopped as Jason entered the cafe. He looked calm, casual, even smiling. Emma froze inside, but outwardly she betrayed no emotion. Jason glanced in her direction, their eyes meeting. She slowly smiled and waved. He nodded briefly, and walked to the counter to order coffee. "He can't see us together," Emma whispered, leaning toward Alec. "Leave through the back exit. I'll call you later." Alec hesitated but stood and left without drawing attention. A few minutes later, Jason approached the table with 2 cups of coffee. He placed one in front of Emma. "I decided to surprise you," he said, sitting down across from her. Emma nodded, pretending to be pleased. "Thank you. You're so thoughtful." She took a sip of coffee, ironically thinking he had no idea how deep her pain had grown. "How's work?" she asked. "Intense," Jason replied, averting his eyes. "A lot of projects right now." Emma nodded silently, but her thoughts were already elsewhere. She knew that his work included meetings with that woman. Her gaze stopped at his hand holding the cup. She remembered recently seeing those hands gently touch another woman's face. A bitter wave of anger washed over her, but she suppressed it. That evening, when Jason fell asleep, Emma quietly took his phone and sent herself screenshots of his recent messages with the blonde woman. They were full of promises and plans for the future, as if she wasn't just his lover but the only woman in his life. Every word hit Emma's heart, but it also fueled her determination. The next day, she met Alec at his apartment. They were planning together. Emma wanted to force Jason to confess everything and do it publicly. She knew it might hurt everyone, but she saw no other way. "We can use these photos," Alec suggested. "Send them to his friends, colleagues." Emma shook her head. "No, I want him to feel it firsthand. He needs to see that I know, and that I'm not afraid anymore." Her voice was firm, but Alec could see how hard it was for her. He wanted to support her, but he also understood that her path could destroy her too. And yet, he couldn't refuse her. A few days later, Jason invited Emma to dinner. They were sitting at a table in a fancy restaurant when she casually brought it up. "I found something interesting in your pocket a few days ago," she said, looking him straight in the eye. Jason almost dropped his fork. "What exactly?" Emma leaned in closer. Her voice dropped to a whisper, but her tone was sharp as a knife. "Room 214. It seems like you left something at the hotel. Or someone." Jason stared at her, not knowing what to say. His face turned pale, and he swallowed nervously. "Emma, it's not what you think." She leaned back in her chair, her face calm, but her eyes burned. "Then tell me what it is. I'm listening." Jason opened his mouth, but couldn't utter a single word. He realized the trap had sprung shut. Emma was sitting in a cozy cafe that smelled of fresh croissants and bitter coffee. Her eyes scanned the laptop screen, where photos Alec had given her last night were displayed. Each one was proof of Jason's lies. In one photo, Jason and the same woman, the blonde from his phone pictures, were holding hands, looking like a couple in love, enjoying a candlelit dinner. In another, they stood in a parking lot, her fingers tenderly touching his cheek. Emma's heart clenched with pain, but her face remained impassive. Across the table sat Alec, watching her intently. His hand hovered midair, as if he wanted to touch her but didn't dare. And now what? He finally broke the silence. Emma looked up at him. Her gaze was fiery. "Now I'll destroy him," she said quietly but firmly. "He thought I would stay silent. He thought I'd just accept it." Alec sighed. "Are you sure this is the right path? Maybe it's better to just leave him?" Emma raised an eyebrow skeptically. "And let him live his life with her in peace?" "No, Alec. He needs to understand that you can't play with someone's feelings without consequences." Alec tried to say something but stopped because, at that moment, Jason walked into the cafe. He looked calm, casual, even smiling. Emma froze inside but betrayed no emotion outwardly. Jason glanced her way, and their eyes met. She slowly smiled and waved. He gave her a brief nod and walked to the counter to order coffee. "He mustn't see us together," Emma said quietly, leaning toward Alec. "Go through the back exit. I'll call you later." Alec hesitated a little, but got up and disappeared without drawing attention. A few minutes later, Jason approached the table with 2 cups of coffee. He placed one in front of Emma. "I decided to surprise you," he said, sitting down across from her. Emma nodded, pretending to be pleased. "Thank you. You're so thoughtful." She took a sip of coffee, ironically thinking he had no idea how deep her pain had grown. "How's work?" she asked. "Intense," Jason replied, averting his eyes. A lot of projects right now. Emma nodded silently, but her thoughts were already elsewhere. She knew that his work included meetings with that woman. Her gaze stopped at his hand holding the cup. She remembered recently seeing those hands gently touch another woman's face. A bitter wave of anger washed over her, but she suppressed it. That evening, when Jason fell asleep, Emma quietly took his phone and sent herself screenshots of his recent messages with the blonde woman. They were full of promises and plans for the future, as if she wasn't just his lover but the only woman in his life. Every word hit Emma's heart, but it also fueled her determination. The next day, she met Alec at his apartment. They were planning together. Emma wanted to force Jason to confess everything and do it publicly. She knew it might hurt everyone, but she saw no other way. We can use these photos, Alec suggested. Send them to his friends, colleagues. Emma shook her head. No, I want him to feel it firsthand. He needs to see that I know, and that I'm not afraid anymore. Her voice was firm, but Alec could see how hard it was for her. He wanted to support her, but he also understood that her path could destroy her too. And yet, he couldn't refuse her. A few days later, Jason invited Emma to dinner. They were sitting at a table in a fancy restaurant when she casually brought it up. I found something interesting in your pocket a few days ago, she said, looking him straight in the eye. Jason almost dropped his fork. What exactly? Emma leaned in closer. Her voice dropped to a whisper, but her tone was sharp as a knife. Room 214. It seems like you left something at the hotel. Or someone. Jason stared at her, not knowing what to say. His face turned pale, and he swallowed nervously. Emma, it's not what you think. She leaned back in her chair, her face calm, but her eyes burned. Then tell me what it is. I'm listening. Jason opened his mouth, but couldn't utter a single word. He realized the trap had sprung shut. Emma stared at Jason as he seemed ready to say what she had been waiting to hear. Her heart beat faster, but not from excitement, from anger. Dinner at the restaurant had turned into a silent duel where every move and glance was part of the game. She leaned in closer, forcing him to feel the pressure of her presence. It was just once, Jason muttered, averting his gaze. Emma frowned but held herself back. Once, she repeated, smiling coldly. And you think that changes anything? Once or 100 times, Jason. It's still betrayal. He raised his head, and a shadow of defiance appeared in his eyes. And you? He blurted. You're not so innocent, Emma. I've seen you with Alec. Constant conversations. Hugs. What is that if not betrayal? Emma froze for a moment, but quickly recovered. Her voice remained calm, though it carried a steely edge. Are you really comparing my friendship with Alec to what you're doing behind my back? She shook her head. That's pathetic, Jason. I wasn't the one hugging someone in a parking lot. And I certainly didn't rent a hotel room. Jason tapped his fingers on the table, trying to collect his thoughts. He looked like a cornered animal, and it only fueled Emma's fire. Fine, he suddenly said, leaning forward. I cheated. But what do you want to hear? That I regret it? That it didn't mean anything? You were never fully with me anyway. You always kept something to yourself, as if I wasn't good enough for you. Emma felt a wave of emotions rising inside her. Anger, pain, disappointment. But she didn't let them take over. Instead, she let out a quiet laugh that made Jason tense up. Is that all you've got? Accusations to justify your weakness? She stood up from her chair, looking down at him. You destroyed yourself, Jason, and now you're trying to destroy me. She picked up her purse and took a step back before adding, but this time, you've lost, and I'll make sure you feel it. Emma walked out of the restaurant, leaving Jason in despair. But she wasn't just going to forget this conversation. She needed a plan, and this time it had to be flawless. She met Alec that same evening. Their meeting was filled with a tension so thick it could be cut with a knife. He confessed, she said shortly, sitting on the couch. But do you know what's worse? He accused me of cheating. Alec frowned. What? How did he justify that? With you, Emma replied, not breaking eye contact. He said we're too close. A silence fell between them. Alec looked puzzled, but then his expression turned resolute. And what did you say to him? Emma shrugged. I told him the truth, that there's nothing between us. But now I think he was just trying to shift the blame, to make me the guilty one so he could avoid responsibility. Alec stared at her intently. His gaze was warm but tense at the same time. And what if he's right? He asked quietly. Emma flinched. Her heart skipped a beat. What do you mean? What if there's more between us than just friendship? He leaned closer, his voice almost a whisper. Have you ever thought about that? Emma wanted to respond, but the words caught in her throat. She felt her hands begin to tremble and quickly hid them in her pockets. Alec didn't look away, and the moment seemed endless. This isn't the time, Alec, she finally said. I have more important things to deal with than this. He leaned back, but his expression remained serious. Fine, but know that I'll always be here if you need support. Emma nodded, avoiding his gaze. She knew Alec was sincere, but right now she couldn't afford to get distracted. Her plan to bring Jason down required her full attention. The next day, Emma appeared at Jason's office unannounced. She was dressed in a flawless black suit, her hair impeccably styled, her face unreadable. We need to talk, she said, walking into his office. Jason looked surprised but quickly composed himself. About what? Emma placed her phone on the desk and pressed play on a video recording. It was their conversation at the restaurant, which she had secretly recorded. His words were clear. I cheated. It was just once. Jason turned pale. You recorded it? Yes, she replied coldly. And if you try to blame me or do anything to ruin my reputation, this video will be seen by everyone. Your colleagues, friends, family. Are you ready for that? He was silent, and then his face twisted into a grimace. You're not going to let this go, are you? Emma smiled, but there was no warmth in her smile. No, Jason. I'm no longer the naive woman you could deceive. She stood up, leaving him alone in the office filled with silence. But this fight was just the beginning. Emma sat in a dimly lit room, staring intently at the laptop screen. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. In front of her was the video that could change her life forever. The video of Jason admitting to his infidelity, and she was about to make it public. Are you absolutely sure about this? Alec's voice interrupted her thoughts. He stood nearby, arms crossed over his chest. His face was tense. This isn't just revenge, Emma. This could backfire on you. Emma nodded slowly, but her eyes remained fixed on the screen. He deserves it, she said quietly. He thought he could destroy me. But this time, I won't back down. Alec stepped closer and gently placed a hand on her shoulder. I understand how you feel, but are you ready for the consequences? This won't go unnoticed. His reputation will suffer, but so could yours. Emma sighed and leaned back in her chair. Maybe you're right, but I can't live with this anymore. I want everyone to know who he really is. She stood up abruptly, grabbed her phone, and began uploading the video to one of the social platforms. Her hands trembled slightly, but her determination was stronger than her fear. She added a short caption, "The truth always comes to light," and pressed the post button. The video spread across the internet like wildfire. Within hours, it had been viewed by thousands of people. The comments flooded in. Some supported Emma, while others questioned her motives. Her phone rang incessantly. Friends, colleagues, even journalists. Everyone wanted to know why she had decided to release such a personal video. But the worst came when her company's manager called. Emma, we need to talk. The voice on the other end was stern. Do you realize this video is already damaging our reputation? She gripped the phone tightly. This is my personal life, and I had the right to reveal the truth, she replied, trying to sound confident. Maybe so, but now you've become a liability for our company. We can't take that risk. Emma realized this wasn't a conversation but a warning. Her career was on the line. At the same time, Jason wasn't sitting idle. He appeared on a local TV channel, trying to defend himself. It was a mistake, he said with regret in his voice. But my wife decided to turn this into a spectacle. She's destroying our family. His words hit Emma hard, but she knew it was just another manipulation. She opened her laptop and began reading the comments under the video. Some people supported her, while others called her cruel and vindictive. Her phone rang again. This time, it was an unknown number. She hesitated, but eventually answered. You're playing with fire, Mrs. Stewart, said a deep male voice. You have no idea who you've crossed. Who is this? Emma felt her heart tighten, but the call ended abruptly. Her fingers clutched the phone nervously, and dozens of questions swirled in her mind. Could it have been Jason? Or perhaps someone from his circle? Meanwhile, Alec was trying to find a way to help Emma. He knew she had taken a step that left no way back. He called her that evening. "Are you safe?" he asked with concern. "I don't know," she admitted. "Someone called and threatened me." Alec was silent for a few seconds. "Listen, I won't leave you to deal with this alone. If Jason thinks he can scare you, he's sorely mistaken." Emma smiled gratefully, even though Alec couldn't see it. "Thank you, but I'm afraid this is just the beginning." Emma sat in the kitchen, listening to the rain outside. Her phone lay nearby, silent and ominous, like a ticking time bomb. The threatening call from a few days ago continued to echo in her mind. She couldn't figure out who was behind it, but she felt the danger was real. Her gaze accidentally fell on the mailbox, where a letter with a red seal lay. Emma approached it, feeling a strange sense of unease, and picked it up. Opening it, she saw only a few lines typed on a typewriter. "You don't know everything about Jason. He has done more than you can imagine. The answer lies in his past." Attached to the letter was a small key to some kind of locker. She clenched it in her hand, feeling the cold metal. Her heart beat faster. Could this be true? Or was it just someone trying to manipulate her pain? That evening, Emma called Alec. He arrived immediately, looking worried. "What happened?" he asked, looking at her. She handed him the letter. "Do you think this is serious?" she whispered. Alec read the text several times, and then focused on the key. "This looks like a key to a safe deposit box, maybe at a bank or a storage locker. If it's real, there could be something important in there." Emma nodded, though doubts raged inside her. She knew this could be a trap, but at the same time, she felt she had to find out the truth. The next day, Emma and Alec went to the address mentioned in the anonymous letter. It was a small bank in the old part of town. They entered, and an employee led them to a metal locker matching the key. When Emma opened it, inside was only a thick envelope. She took it, and they quickly left the premises. In the car, Emma carefully opened the envelope. Inside were photographs and documents. She flipped through them one by one, her face growing paler with each passing moment. This can't be true," she whispered. The photographs showed Jason, but with other women. One of them looked familiar. Emma recognized her. It was the blonde woman Jason had cheated on her with. But there were others, women whose faces looked frightened or hopeless. Some photos were taken in hotel rooms, others in private homes. Among the documents was a handwritten letter. "If you're reading this, then you've found the answer. Jason isn't just a cheater. He manipulates people and destroys their lives. I know this because I was one of his victims." Emma felt as if the entire world had collapsed around her. She remembered all the times Jason had seemed perfect. Now, it all looked like a performance. "What are you going to do?" Alec asked, looking at her with concern. Emma was silent for a few minutes, then looked him in the eye. "I'll expose him. And this time, completely." Emma sat in her car, parked near a small cafe on the outskirts of town. The wind played with her hair as she stared at her phone. In front of her was a text from a woman who had signed only as Sarah. "Meet me at Harmony Cafe tomorrow at 2 p.m. Don't be late." Emma took a deep breath. She had managed to find Sarah, one of the women from the photographs. She didn't know what she would learn, but she felt this meeting would reveal a lot about Jason. Inside the cafe, it was quiet. Only a few tables were occupied, and the atmosphere felt almost cozy. Sarah sat in a corner, holding a cup of coffee. Her face was tense, but she tried to smile when she saw Emma. "You're Emma, right?" she asked, gesturing to an empty chair. "Yes, that's me," Emma replied, sitting down. "Thank you for agreeing to meet me." Sarah nodded, but didn't rush to start the conversation. Her hands nervously twisted a napkin. Finally, she spoke. "I don't know if my story will help you, but I couldn't ignore this. Jason, he ruined my life." Emma didn't interrupt, allowing her to talk. Sarah told her how she had met Jason a few years ago. At first, he seemed perfect, charismatic, caring, attentive. But over time, his true nature began to emerge. He controlled her, used her finances, and when she tried to end the relationship, he began threatening her. He said that if I tried to do anything, he'd destroy me, Sarah continued, her voice trembling. And he did. I lost my job. My friends turned their backs on me. He knows how to manipulate people. Emma felt her anger rising. She asked, "Do you know anyone else who was hurt by him?" Sarah nodded. "Yes, there are a few other women. We even tried to come together, but everyone was too scared. One of them, she disappeared. She just stopped responding." Emma froze. Missing? This added an even more chilling tone to the story. "Do you know her name?" she asked. "Amanda," Sarah replied. "She was the bravest of us all. She wanted to expose everything publicly, but after our last meeting, she just vanished." After the meeting, Emma couldn't calm herself. She knew she now had to contact the other women and find out more about what happened to Amanda. But the more she learned, the scarier it became. At home, another surprise awaited her. In the mailbox was an envelope with no return address. Inside was a single photograph, her and Sarah in the cafe. On the back was written, "Don't dig where you shouldn't." Emma felt a chill run through her body. Someone was watching her. But who? Jason or one of his allies? She couldn't know. Emma sat in the dimly lit living room, swirling a glass of red wine. Her thoughts were chaotic, like a hurricane. The photograph left in the envelope haunted her. Someone was watching her, knew her every move. But who? And was it Jason? The phone on the table vibrated, making her flinch. Slowly, she picked it up, thinking it was another call from a journalist or one of the women she was trying to locate. But the number was unknown. "Hello?" Her voice trembled slightly, but she tried to sound confident. "You're playing a very dangerous game, Emma," Jason's familiar voice said. His tone was calm, but there were undertones of menace. "You have no idea who you're dealing with, do you, Jason?" she replied, trying to keep her composure. "All your secrets will come to light, and there's nothing you can do about it." Jason laughed, but his laugh was cold. "You think you've won? You've only opened the door to something much bigger than your little games. And if you don't stop now, I'll make you stop." The call ended, leaving Emma in a state of alarm. She placed the phone back on the table and buried her face in her hands. Now she knew Jason was aware of her investigation. But what did he mean by something much bigger? The next morning, Emma was awakened by a knock at the door. The sense of unease hadn't left her. She approached the door, peeked through the peephole, and saw Alec. Opening the door, she immediately noticed he looked tense. "We need to talk," he said, stepping into the apartment. "I think you're in danger." Emma nodded, showing him the photograph she had found in the envelope. Alec examined it carefully and then looked at Emma. "This is bad," he said. "If Jason knows you're digging, he'll do anything to stop you." "What do you mean?" she asked, though she already suspected the answer. Alec sighed deeply. "He has connections. People who help him cover his tracks. If he feels threatened, he might go further than you can imagine." Emma felt her heart tighten. She had never thought Jason could be this dangerous. But now, she had to be prepared for anything. Later that day, Emma received a message from an unknown number. "Meet me at the Lancaster Hotel at 8 p.m. I can help you." She showed it to Alec, who immediately objected. "It could be a trap, or a chance to learn something important," she replied. "I can't afford to stop now." The evening came faster than Emma expected. She entered the hotel, feeling her heart race wildly. In the lobby, she was approached by a woman in dark sunglasses and a hat who introduced herself as Maria. "Do you trust your friends?" she asked without greeting. Emma was taken aback. "What do you mean?" Maria looked her straight in the eye. "Jason has an informant. Someone in your circle is telling him your every move." Emma sat on the edge of her bed, clutching a small device found among Alec's belongings. Her heart was pounding, and her mind raced with thoughts. It was a GPS tracker. Now she had reasons to doubt the one person she trusted the most. Could Alec be Jason's informant? She picked up her phone to call him, but stopped herself. Instead, she decided to play it carefully. She needed answers, but without direct confrontation. That evening, Alec came to her apartment, looking as concerned as always. He brought her coffee and sat across from her. "You look exhausted," he remarked. "Are you okay?" Emma looked at him. Her gaze was cold, but she forced a smile. I've just been thinking a lot about everything that's happening, she said. I constantly feel like someone's watching me. Alec leaned forward, his eyes filled with worry. If it's Jason, we need to act. I won't let him harm you. What if it's not Jason? She asked, carefully watching his reaction. What if it's someone closer? Alec tensed but quickly recovered. You think it's someone we know? His voice sounded genuinely surprised. Emma, I've been on your side this whole time. How can you doubt that? She didn't reply, only shrugged. The next day, Emma decided to test her suspicions. She knew Alec often worked at a local cafe where he might meet with Jason or his associates. She sat a few tables away from him, her phone camera ready. An hour later, a man in a dark suit approached Alec. They exchanged a few words quickly, and Alec handed him an envelope. Emma felt her heart sink. She took several photos but decided not to act just yet. That evening, Alec came to her apartment again. He looked tense but tried to appear calm. I think we need to have a serious talk, Emma began, setting a cup of tea on the table. Are you hiding something from me, Alec? He stared at her, not breaking eye contact. What do you mean? Emma pulled out her phone and showed him the photos. Who was this man? And what was in the envelope? Alec froze. His face went pale, and he was silent for a few seconds. Then he sighed. It's not what you think, he finally said. I was trying to protect you. Protect me? From whom? Emma's voice trembled. From Jason, he replied. I've been working for him, but only to find out his plans and keep you safe. Emma, I would never betray you. Emma looked at him, feeling a mix of emotions. Anger, disappointment, doubt. Could she trust him? Emma stood by the window of her apartment, looking out at the city sinking into night. The sense of unease wouldn't leave her, and after her conversation with Alec, everything felt even more complicated. Her suspicions about his involvement with Jason had only grown stronger, but she still hesitated. If Alec truly betrayed her, it would hurt more than she could imagine. Suddenly, her phone vibrated. A message. Check your mailbox. The answers are there. Emma grabbed her jacket and quickly went downstairs. Opening the mailbox, she found a small envelope. Inside was a USB drive and a short note. You need to know the truth before you trust anyone. Back in her apartment, Emma plugged the drive into her laptop. There was only one video file. She pressed play, and the screen came to life. The video showed Alec sitting in the same cafe where she had recently seen him with the man in the dark suit. Across from him sat Jason. Emma stared at the screen, trying to catch every word. Jason's voice was quiet but commanding. You're doing good work, he said, stirring sugar into his coffee. She still suspects nothing? No, Alec replied, lowering his gaze. But she's starting to have doubts. Jason smiled, leaning in closer. You need to keep her under control. If she starts acting, it will ruin everything. And remember, Alec, if you try to deceive me, you'll regret it. Emma felt her breath catch. She turned off the video, her hands trembling. Alec wasn't just working for Jason. He was consciously helping him. That same night, she received a call from Alec. Emma, we need to meet, he said, his voice tense. I know you're doubting me, but I can't explain everything. Emma held her breath. Fine. Tomorrow morning in the park, she replied, trying to sound calm. But be ready to answer all my questions. The next morning, Emma arrived at the park, her phone recording audio in her pocket. Alec was already there, looking worried. I know what you saw, he began, not waiting for her to speak. But it's not what it seems. Emma crossed her arms. Then explain, Alec. Why are you working with Jason? Why are you listening to him? Alec took a deep breath and looked her straight in the eye. Jason has me in a chokehold, Emma. He has information that could ruin my life. I had no choice. But I've been trying to protect you. All this time, I've only given him things that wouldn't harm you. Protect me? Emma's voice was filled with anger. You betrayed me, Alec. You allowed him to use me, to manipulate me. She took a step back, trying to hold back her tears. Alec looked distraught, but she couldn't trust him anymore. This is over, she said, turning to leave. Emma, wait. He called out, but she didn't turn back. Alec stood in the shadows of an old warehouse, his phone pressed to his ear. On the other end of the line was Jason. His voice was calm, but each word carried an unspoken threat. "She knows too much," Jason said. "Are you sure you're still in control of the situation?" Alec took a deep breath, feeling cold sweat run down his back. "I'm doing everything I can, but she doesn't trust me anymore," he replied, trying to sound confident. Jason was silent for a few seconds, then his voice grew even colder. "If you don't fix this, I'll find someone who can." The call ended, leaving Alec alone in the silence. He realized time was running out. The only way to protect Emma was to act quickly, even if it meant revealing everything. Meanwhile, Emma was at home, poring over the documents she had received from Maria. They contained records of Jason's financial fraud, connections to criminal circles, and even suspicions regarding the disappearances of several people. She knew these materials could destroy him, but she also understood how dangerous this game had become. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door. She approached cautiously and peered through the peephole. It was Alec. Her heart tightened. She hesitated but eventually opened the door. "What do you want?" she asked coldly. Alec looked exhausted, his eyes red from sleepless nights. "Emma, I've come to tell you everything. Jason is planning something terrible, and it involves you." Emma crossed her arms but let him continue. "He knows you're planning to release the information, and he's willing to go to extremes to stop you," Alec said. "I thought I could control him, but I was wrong. Why should I believe you?" Her voice was sharp as a blade. Alec didn't answer immediately. He pulled out his phone and showed her a message from Jason. "She has to disappear by tomorrow, or you will." Emma felt her heart freeze. She realized the threat was now very real. "Why didn't you just go to the police?" she asked. "Do you think they can stop him?" "He has connections that go far beyond what you can imagine," Alec replied. "But we can stop him together. I have a plan." The next day, Emma and Alec arrived at an abandoned warehouse where Jason was supposed to meet one of his allies. They set up a hidden camera to record everything that would happen. Jason showed up as expected, but he wasn't alone. 2 men accompanied him, clearly hired for problem-solving. Emma watched the laptop screen, seeing everything in real time. "This is a bad idea," she whispered. "It's our only chance," Alec replied. "If we don't do it now, he'll win." Suddenly, one of the men with Jason picked up a phone and made a call. Within seconds, Alec's phone vibrated. Emma looked at him in horror. "They know we're here," Alec whispered. "We have to leave." But it was too late. The warehouse doors burst open, and the 2 men entered. One of them was holding a gun. "Did you think you could outsmart me?" Jason asked, stepping in behind them. His voice was filled with fury. "You've already lost, Jason," Emma said, trying to sound brave. "Lost?" he laughed. "You lost the moment you decided to play my game." He gestured with his hand, and one of the men aimed the gun at Alec. The gunshot rang out like thunder, and Alec fell to the floor. "No!" Emma screamed, rushing to him. Jason leaned down toward her, his smile cold. "This is your last warning, Emma. Stop now, or you'll be next." He and his men disappeared as quickly as they had come, leaving her alone with Alec's motionless body. Emma sat on the warehouse floor, her hands covered in blood. She stared at Alec's phone, which was still lit. On the screen was a message: "This is just the beginning." Could Emma keep fighting, knowing that everyone she cared about might be the next victim?